Hello, friends. Today we are going to talk a French drama called Gemma Bovery. Once Martin Joubert lived in Paris and enjoyed the aesthetics of the old city with its luxury and sophistication. He adored art and literature, was fond of the works of the famous realist writer Gustave Flaubert. But 7 years ago, Martin returned to Normandy to take over his father's bakery, the main attraction of the small town. However, a new batch of pastries turned out to be burnt, which surprised and angered his wife Valerie. Martin says that he is very concerned about the condition of his neighbor Charlie, and thinks that he may lay hands on himself. After work, the man immediately goes to the neighbor's house and catches Charlie throwing his late wife's things into the fire. Martin manages to get the girl's diary before the fire destroys everything. It all started 6 months ago. While working in the garden, Martin noticed a car pull up to the neighbor's house. The new neighbors turned out to be a couple from England, Charlie and Gemma Bovery. Hearing the surname, the baker looked at the girl with interest because she looked exactly as he imagined the heroine of the novel of the same name. The very next day, a couple of Bovery came to the neighbor's bread shop. The girl admiringly chose bread, inhaling its aroma, while Martin could not take his eyes off her. Accidentally meeting Gemma on a walk with his dog, the baker finally realized that the young girl awakened in him long-forgotten feelings. Late in the evening, Charles knocked on Joubert's door. In their house, the light had stopped burning, and he turned to his neighbor for help. Martin agreed to help and gladly accepted the invitation to drink some wine. The conversation was mostly between Martin's wife and Charles, while the baker kept watching Gemma. In his mind, he remembered the lines from the book that Madame Bovary was bored, living a quiet family life. That was exactly what the girl looked like now. However, the tranquility was quickly interrupted by a mouse that ran right under Gemma's feet. The girl screamed and immediately began to talk about the need to buy rat poison, which greatly frightened Martin, who claimed that accidents often happen because of the poison. Now, every day, Martin was connected with his neighbor. He either watched her from the window of his house or waited impatiently for her to come to the bakery. One day, the baker even invited the girl into the kitchen to let her try to bake bread herself. Martin watched Gemma with lust, looking at every part of her body. On one of her visits to the store, Gemma meets a married couple. They invite the girl and her husband to dinner and offer them jobs. Gemma is an interior artist, and Charlie restores old things. To this dinner comes, and Martin, along with Valerie, continues to observe the object of his fantasies. The hostess takes Gemma to the gym, which she would like to repaint, and starts a conversation about exercise machines and fitness, clearly indicating that Gemma needs to lose a few pounds, which greatly affects the girl. A few days later, Martin meets Gemma in the park. He makes flattering remarks about her figure, which embarrasses the girl. She hurries to go home, but at that moment a bee gets under her dress and stings her back. The girl screams and asks for help. With shaking hands, Martin unzips her dress and catches the insect, which has managed to leave a sting. The man has no choice but to suck the poison, which the girl readily agrees to. Hearing the screams, a young Frenchman, Hervé, who lives in a large mansion nearby, runs up to them. While Martin explains what is happening, Gemma falls unconscious. The men rush her to the hospital where she is treated. The next day, a couple from England comes to visit the Boverys. Looking at a magazine, Gemma notices there her former fiancé Patrick, who once cheated on her. Gemma misses him all the time because Charles is always immersed in books or doing something in the workshop, not paying attention to the current ceiling and faulty wiring. A little later, Gemma goes to the market, where she is again noticed by Martin, who has come out on the porch of the store. He watches the girl, reciting the lines of the novel to himself, occasionally adding something of his own. Suddenly, he sees that Hervé has approached Bovary and started a light, casual conversation. The next meeting of the girl and the young man took place in the store at the wine window. The young man recommended the best drink available and invited the new neighbor to visit his mansion, built several centuries ago. On the way home, Martin overtakes Gemma's car, but she doesn't notice him. Not reaching the turn to the house, the girl turns towards the mansion. Martin decides to follow her, but when he sees that she has entered the house, he does not dare to look through the window and just drives away. In the evening, they had a dinner with neighbors, and when Gemma sat next to Martin, he noticed on her neck a clear imprint of passionate love left by the young Frenchman. From that day on, the baker began to keep an eye on his neighbor. It was not difficult because the girl boldly left the house in a dress and heels, disguised as a walk with the dog. But in reality, she spent her time making love to Hervé. And again at the bakery, Gemma bought bread and a croissant, but forgot them at the checkout. The baker is only too happy for an excuse to visit his neighbor. But as he approaches the house, he hears passionate moans, knowing that Charlie has gone to London. The man realizes who is now visiting the girl. Having never returned the forgotten croissant, the man returns home and sits in the kitchen all night pondering his feelings. When Charles returns, Gemma and Hervé's affair is still going on. The girl once again goes for a long walk with the dog, and the man realizes that his marriage is probably cracking at the seams. At Hervé's estate, the couple passionately makes love right on the table. Gemma touches a porcelain statue, and it falls, splitting into two parts. The guy is not on a joke upset because this thing is very dear to his mother, but the girl calms him down. She will take the statue with her and ask her husband to restore it, leaving the name of the customer in secret. Martin constantly thinks about the fact that he wants to break the relationship between Gemma and Hervé. The man does not deceive himself and does not try to cover himself with morality or male solidarity. He frankly admits that it is only about his jealousy. After thinking it over, Martin decides to end Gemma and Hervé's affair by any means necessary. The next day, Gemma picks up letters from the mailbox. One of them is supposedly from Hervé, in which he informs her that their relationship is over. Not hiding her feelings from her husband, the girl runs to the house of the Frenchman, where he is just at this time listening to lectures from his mother. The woman is outraged not only by the fact that her son is not engaged in preparation for his studies, but also by the absence of his favorite statuette. At the gates of the estate, Gemma receives a message from a guy, which says that he has to return to Paris and he will not be able to go with her to London, where they plan to spend a few days. Back home, Gemma wants to talk to her husband, but he guesses the content of the conversation, so he packs his suitcase and leaves to get away from his unfaithful wife. The next day, Gemma meets Martin and asks for his help in translating a letter. The baker once again stares at the young beauty and cannot concentrate on the text. The silence is interrupted by a mouse that runs right through the girl. Martin kills the rodent and notices a bag of rat poison, which makes the baker lose his temper and tells him not to keep poisons at home, because it is very dangerous. Gemma spends her free time in the house of English neighbors doing repairs. There she meets Patrick, who turns out to be a friend of their family. The man is definitely happy to see the girl and is probably set on renewing the relationship. The next day, Gemma arranged a meeting with Martin, to which she never showed up. When the baker went outside, he noticed the girl in the arms of Patrick. However, sitting in the restaurant, Gemma admits to her former fiancé that it was a momentary weakness, and she strongly regrets it. Upon arriving home, Gemma packs her things, deciding to sell the house and return to London to mend her relationship with her husband. She then finds a repaired statue and leaves Charles a tender voicemail message. Not far from the house, she sees Martin, apologizes for not coming to the meeting, and invites him to visit for a farewell drink. In the course of the conversation, it turns out that it was Martin who sent the letter on behalf of Hervé. The girl understands the motives that pushed her neighbor to such a step, and, kissing him, asks him to leave. Sometime later, Martin brings her a basket of freshly baked bread as a parting gift. However, it is not Martin who knocks on the door, but Patrick, who has come to make another attempt at a new start. While working in the garden, Martin sees a cab pull up to the neighbor's house, from which Charlie gets out. The baker is delighted that things are finally going to get back to normal. But a few minutes later, Charles runs out of the house screaming for help, and it turns out that Gemma has passed away. Martin is convinced that rat poison is to blame. However, the coroner claims that she died of suffocation by choking on a piece of bread. The baker considers himself guilty of what happened and tells Charlie about it at the funeral. But the latter blames himself because, when he arrived home, he found Patrick and Gemma in an incomprehensible position and had a showdown instead of helping his wife. Each of the men blames themselves for what happened. Leaving the cemetery, Martin turns around and notices Hervé, who also came to honor the memory of the beloved girl. 6 months later, there are new neighbors, who caused an extraordinary interest in Martin. But that's another story.